I would now like to go ahead and introduce the featured speaker, Gunjan Bagla. Just this morning, Gunjan's article has been published in the top blog, Huffington Post, called All About Trade, First U.S. Cabinet Level Visit to India's Modi Government. If any of you would like a link to this article, please just email us or send us a little a note in the chat box, and we will go ahead and send it to you. Gunjan Bagla is the managing director of Amritt, a California-based consulting firm focused on helping American companies succeed in India. His clients include Westinghouse Electric, Trigicon, Underwater Construction, Clorox, Kraft, Hewlett-Packard, Paramount Farms, and many more. Gunjan's work on India's consumer market has been featured in the Harvard Business Review, and he has also written for Happy Magazine. For his India expertise, Gunjan has appeared in the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post, on Bloomberg TV, on BBC TV, and on Fox Business News. He writes about India for the Huffington Post and has been quoted twice in Forbes magazine just in the past couple of months. Gunjan has an MBA from Southern Illinois University and a mechanical engineering degree from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur in India. He was the president of the Alumni Association of the IITs. Gunjan, on to you.
Thank you, Supriya, and welcome to all of you who have joined in from all over the US and some from Europe and Asia as well. I know it's late in that part of the world, and we will try to keep this webinar very fast-paced. So India has been in the news recently, and you might recognize Secretary Penny Pritzker in the red dress on the top left. She is the wealthiest member of President Obama's cabinet, and in fact the wealthiest member of any presidential cabinet in the last 60 years or so since Andrew Mellon. And she took over commerce just a year ago. She and Secretary of State John Kerry, who's featured in the bottom picture sitting next to the new Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, both of them traveled to India, to New Delhi and Mumbai, and had a series of vigorous discussions about politics and diplomacy, but just as much about trade. And as Supriya mentioned, I wrote about the trade aspects of this visit for the Huffington Post. The article appeared live this morning, and I welcome you to read it or ask for a link or Google it if you like, and you can find out my thoughts on what's happening. We think this is a very exciting time for American companies thinking about India, and we will get into the specifics on that very soon. What I also want to do is understand the composition of our audience, and Supriya mentioned the interactive polls, so we will do one very soon. In fact, Supriya, why don't we do one right now, if you start with question number 1 on the poll.
Okay.
Okay, would you like to start it, Supriya?
Yes, give me a minute.
Okay, so on your screen you should see a question about which emerging markets are most important to you this year. And while everybody talks about the BRIC countries, Russia has dropped out of favor lately, so it's not included on this list. All right, so good 3/4 of you are interested in India, and 10% in Brazil. I'm surprised to see the very low level of interest in China, and this may just have to do with the fact that the announcement mentioned India very prominently. But typically we see maybe at least half of the people who say they're interested in India are also interested in China. But that's fine. Go ahead and close the screen out, Supriya. Okay. Let me start with an example of something we did a little while ago for one of our B2B clients. This company, whose name I cannot mention, was looking to find partners that it could invest in or acquire in the broad energy-related sector. They were really looking for small acquisitions at this stage because they were not sure of their degree of desire to invest in India. So they told us that they were only looking for people under $10 million. And the whole idea was speed of moving quickly and getting the market access. So we looked at almost 70 candidates, 75 candidates for this particular company. And our first round was really focused on Indian companies. We found a dozen that we could take forward that seemed very credible. But while the client had not asked us for this, we also came across in our search for a couple of foreign companies that had business units in India that really were no longer of prime interest to them because of other acquisitions and changes of strategy at these companies. So we offered these two units as well to our clients in their considerations. And after vigorous discussion inside of the company, the VP of Corporate Development along with the head of sales and strategy for Asia decided that they wanted to pick 4 to visit along with us. And then Amritt was actively involved in facilitating those meetings. Our senior people participated in the discussions with each of these companies when the client's team flew over to visit them in India. The net result, fast forward another year, I would say, is that they decided that it made sense to simply acquire the assets of one of these foreign units that were available for sale. They didn't acquire the entire company in India. They just acquired the assets and some of the people. So it proved to be a very good price. And then they decided one of the other candidates that we had found didn't really need to be acquired, didn't really need an investment by our client, and they simply signed them on as a very specialized vertical channel partner for about 10 to 20% of their intended business in India, but one that they would not otherwise have been able to address. So it was a happy story. They were able to invest less than $3 million, and they were able to find solutions that were slightly different from what they expected, but in the time frame that they wanted, and they were able to get a strong footprint in India as a result. We've continued to do more work for this client since then. I can't really specifically talk about that because it's been in the press, and the client is still in negotiations on many of these business opportunities, but it's been a very happy experience for them in India. So today I'm going to give you a quick overview, and then I will jump into the 4 P's of marketing as applied to India, and then go on from there. Let's just talk about the highlights here in terms of some sectors. And I thought, since I live in Los Angeles, that I will start with entertainment. Some of you might recognize Leonardo DiCaprio in the picture on the left, and he has about 10 million followers, 10.5 million followers on Twitter. But I bet many of you don't recognize the person on the left. He is India's biggest movie star and has been at the top of the box office really for an incredible 20-25 years. And he was featured for the first time in an American movie that was released last year, The Great Gatsby, the 4th or 5th rendering of The Great Gatsby, and he played the part of Meyer Wolfsheim, if you saw that movie. And he has, as of this morning, 9.62 million followers on Twitter in a country where Twitter is used by less than 10% of the population. So my prediction is that in a couple of years, Amitabh Bachchan, that's his name, will have twice as many followers as Leonardo DiCaprio. And the reason I make this point is that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for entertainment industry collaboration between the two countries, whether it has to do with movie making, television, video games, any aspect of media. India produces far more movies than Hollywood does, and its technical capabilities, the capabilities of its producers, actors, and directors are now world-class. The reason you don't see Indian movies here is that they are really designed for an Indian audience. They're extremely popular in the rest of the world outside of the Western countries. If you travel to Africa or the Middle East or even China, you will find them quite popular. I think that's going to change based on a number of things that I won't get into right now unless someone has a question. Taking a completely different approach, and again focused here on Southern California, just as an example from my neighborhood. About 5 miles from where I am sitting is the factory where the C-17 transport aircraft, which is pictured on the top right, is manufactured. And India placed an order of $4.1 billion on Boeing to buy the C-17 aircraft. Some of them have already been delivered, and when the deliveries are complete next year, the Indian Air Force will be the largest operator of the C-17, next only to the US Air Force. It's a huge piece of business. It kept this factory going for a number of years when Boeing had announced previously that they would shut it down. So Indian taxpayers are supporting jobs right here in my neighborhood in Southern California. But defense is a huge opportunity for companies across the country. On the left is pictured at one of our other clients at Trigicon, and Trigicon makes these sights that go on top of guns and rifles, and these are used by police forces, by paramilitary, and by the Army and the US Marine Corps, for example. We've been working with them for a number of years to increase their success in India, and it has worked out very well for them, both in the state and provincial level as well as at the federal level. India today is the largest importer of weapons and equipment in the world, and the US has gone from zero to becoming India's largest defense supplier in the space of just 10 years. So many American companies are rushing to India. On the right, I have some other examples. GE has supplied large turbines to Indian power plants. The Walt Disney Company has a subsidiary in India where they produce movies in India for India, but with the Disney flair, and that's doing extremely well. At the bottom, I have a picture of the Cummins India plant, and Cummins is noticeable because if you look at the graph on the left, this appeared in The Economist last year, and they looked at global companies and their share of sales in India, and the column, the number in white here, represents the percentage of their market cap that is attributed to the India operation. So you'll see giants such as Unilever, 15%, Suzuki, Japanese company, 59%, Nestle, which is huge, the largest food company in the world, 4%. There's only one American company on this list, which is Cummins, which makes generators and engines and so on, and they are at 12%. My prediction is that if things go right between now and the next 5 to 10 years, that this list will have at least half of the companies as American companies. So there's a huge upside opportunity for people in this country to be able to benefit from the growth of the economy in India, particularly given the new government and its very pro-business friendly kind of attitude. I call it a $110 billion opportunity as of today, and our prediction is that bilateral trade between the two countries could go up to as much as $500 billion in a very reasonable time. This is a situation where 10 years ago the trade was less than $20 billion bilaterally. So the growth has been really exponential. And this is because India is among the top 4 economies in purchasing power parity. In fact, it exceeded Japan just recently, so this slide is now out of date because only the US and China are larger in terms of purchasing power parity. The other important thing is that India is a very young country. More than half of its population is under the age of 25, and most of them have a very favorable view of the United States, so they are open to buying American and affiliating with American companies. I'm not going to read you all the points on the slide. I'll continue. I think it's really important to realize that this is a good time to be thinking about India. India had the world's largest ever election in May, and for the first time since 1984, a single party took the majority and upset the previous government in power. And now Narendra Modi's BJP controls the lower house of parliament. Prime Minister Modi will be visiting Washington next month, and the Kerry Pritzker visit last week was in preparation to that. So we think that many good things are going to happen. Some have already happened. Last month, again, I wrote for the Huffington Post, and there were quotes in Forbes and other publications about how the new government, when it released its interim budget, already announced that they would increase the foreign investment possible in defense as well as in financial services such as insurance to 49%. Until a few months ago, the limit was only 26%, which had limited many American companies from wanting to get in there. So a lot of good things are happening, and this is the year where you want to really focus on India if you want to get ahead of your competition. I've got 10 sectors here that I think are of interest in India. This is not a comprehensive list by any means. So if your business is in another sector, then don't feel like you shouldn't be going to India. These are just examples where things are going to leapfrog and go extremely well. Supriya, are there questions that we can take at this time?
No, not yet. So I would encourage people to please send in any questions you have.
Yeah, let's do our next poll in that case.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, folks, do send me the questions because I don't want to talk about these 10 sectors in detail unless there are people who are specifically interested in one of them. Okay, and so now I want to know a little bit about your familiarity with India. And the measure that I like to use is how much time have you spent on business, not as a tourist, not visiting family or passing through for a conference, but on business in India in the last 5 to 6 years. So if you can choose the right answer, we would really appreciate it. And as you've seen, your answers are confidential. Nobody else sees them. Alrighty. So about a third of you have spent more than 30 days in India, and almost half of you have spent no time at all.
All right, I'm going to
go ahead. We have a bimodal distribution here, and I'll try and address my remarks for both people who are very familiar with India and people who are not familiar at all. I think I see a question. Supriya, can you read it out, please?
Yes. This is a question. I am particularly interested in the energy sector for fossil fuels, etc. What about the Indian bureaucracy of dealing with business development projects?
So I think that's a great question. And when you are looking at energy, typically anywhere in the world, you do have to deal with the government bureaucracy. The good news is that things are getting much better now than they used to be. 10 years ago, most of India's energy sector was entirely in the hands of federal and state governments. And since then, the production of energy has been opened up outside of the nuclear energy area, which is still the domain of the government. But fossil fuel, oil, coal have been opened up. So power plants can now be owned by private corporations. And there's a number of them that have become very active. And so if you want to play in that space now, there's plenty of opportunity. If you're a supplier of products or technology that goes into energy, whether it's oil, gas, coal, or other forms, as well as renewable energy. But I think the question's focused on fossils, so I'll limit myself to that.
We have another question, Gunjan, from Tony, which kind of adds to it about is India becoming more business friendly?
Yes, okay, great. In fact, you took the words right out of my mouth. So I have described this current government as the most business-friendly government since India became independent in 1947. Okay, so this is the Prime Minister Narendra Modi ran the state of Gujarat. He's the first chief minister, which is the rough equivalent of a governor. In India's history, he's the first chief minister to become prime minister. So he knows what running a state is like. He's not just come from being a parliamentarian or he actually has executive experience. And the state of Gujarat, over the 10 odd years that he was chief minister, has done remarkably well. Many of our clients, in fact, have located their factories in Gujarat, and Ford, whom I'll get to later on, is planning to invest up to $1 billion in Gujarat. You see companies from every country investing there. And so we expect to see a transmission of that kind of business-friendly attitude to the federal or central government. This will not impact all states because India is a federal government, and there are some states who won't be so business-friendly. In fact, we'll expect probably the differences to grow. But the states that want to take advantage of the business-friendly attitude, I think, will find a great friend in New Delhi, and as a result, things will continue to get better. Now, I should caution Tony that this does not mean that India anytime soon will be like Singapore or Hong Kong in terms of business friendliness. We're talking about a country that was, when the UN and the World Bank run their doing business studies, India has featured near the bottom of many of their rankings in terms of ease of doing business. So we expect over the next few years that it will move up many, many notches, but it's not going to be, next to a Switzerland or a Hong Kong or a Singapore anytime soon. However, I will say that if companies are committed to India and they want to succeed, the government bureaucracy will not be the principal barrier holding them back. Prime Minister Modi has done some very interesting things with the way he structured his cabinet, and I'll bring out just one that relates to energy. So historically, India has had an explosion of cabinet-level ministers, and there's a minister in charge of energy or power, as they call it in India, and a separate minister in charge of oil, and a separate minister in charge of coal. And often the coal and the power ministries would be at loggerheads on turf grounds. So what Prime Minister Modi did is that when he took power, he had the same individual be responsible for both power and coal. Piyush Goyal, whose brother I actually went to school with, has been given that charge, and we've instantly seen the conflict between those two ministries drop. He's done something similar for two of the most powerful ministries, defense and finance. They are in one hand as well, Arun Jaitley. So we think India is getting definitely much more business friendly. Okay. Any other questions, Supriya, at this point?
No, that's it for now. So you can go ahead with the presentation. Thank you.
All righty. So let's switch to talking about the process of getting into India. And often when people are new, the 43% of people who have not been to India, I imagine many of them don't have a business there. When we are approached by many such companies, they often ask us this question, please help us select a distributor. We get a lot of inquiries, Gunjan, on our website and at trade shows of people who can distribute our product to India. We know it's a big country, we don't quite understand it. Just help us find the right distributor and our problems in India will be solved. So my question to you is, how many mistakes are potentially embedded in this statement? A lot of the success in India has to do with asking the right questions. And we think that asking for help in selecting a distributor is sometimes the wrong question. And my contention is that there are potentially 3 mistakes with each of the words, with one in each of the words here. So do you really need a distributor? For many companies, yes, you do need a distributor. But there are many examples of people who have succeeded without having a distributor. I'll give you 2 extreme examples. Pratt & Whitney sells engines into India, and they have a direct salesperson who travels from the US to India as needed to make the sales, and they have a vigorous business in India. At the other extreme is a dating service, roughly like Match.com, other than the fact that it offers services for people who want to go on a group date. The company started in New York City, but they found very rapidly that most of their traffic was coming from Mumbai and Delhi. And so they were able to win a considerable amount of business over the internet while being located in Manhattan. In fact, more recently, the company has become so successful in India, they actually took the entire staff, lock, stock, and barrel and moved to India. So they are now an American company operating with an India headquarters. Another example was an automotive client of ours, and they had quite a bit of success in China, but not much in India. They wanted to essentially make sales to the large OEMs, the manufacturers of cars, and their product was some kind of a seal, basically. We recommended to them that they hire, rather than a distributor, they hire one salesperson who could go call on a small subset of the automotive companies where we felt that they had the highest chance of success. And over a period of, OEM sales take 2 or 3 years to actually come to fruition. And over a period of a couple of years, they won 3 or 4 very significant victories in India using American-made product being sold into India. And once they did that, then they could expand their business out, but they still don't have a distributor. They've actually hired 2 or 3 more salespeople. I've got other examples here, and again, I won't dwell on them because one is a consumer example where the company set up a subsidiary to work, and then there are companies who can simply license their technology or their brand and not put in any dollar investment, not go to distribution, none of that. So there are many possibilities of finding a path to revenue for your company to succeed in India. I'm going to skip over this example in the interest of time right now. So let's just get to the second point here, the idea about select a distributor. That often implies that we want one distributor. And India is a country with a population larger than Europe. People speak 20 different languages across the country. And the movement of goods across India is not as smooth as you might see. United Parcel Service and FedEx can deliver goods from California to Florida in a very reliable, robust, and predictable manner. That's really not the case in India. So you put all of that together, and you come away with the conclusion that very few distributors in India have national scale, and very few are well capitalized enough to provide any more than the physical movement of goods in a very limited area. So just as an example, one of the companies I talked about early on, which has 15% of its value from India, Unilever, they have over 4,000 distributors in India. So the idea of having just one or even 2 or 3 distributors for your product or brand in India is typically not the right solution. And most people who approach you at a trade show or over email or on your website will say, yes, I have, I can cover the Western India, and my brother-in-law's cousin can cover this other place, and we have a deep relationship somewhere else. Well, I encourage you to examine those claims very, very carefully, because often they are not fully substantiated. And it's not that the people's intent is not there, it's just that their capability is not there. There are some exceptions. Again, I don't say this applies to everyone, but it's something you need to keep in mind. The other point, the final point I want to make about that statement is this whole idea about select a distributor. That implies that you've got all these inquiries on your website, you've got 20 or 30 people, 5 or 6 of them seem credible, and let's just look at those 5 or 6 and find the, vet the best one of them. We think that that's a mistake in many cases. We think that you get much better results by looking at your business and your needs and conducting a primary search. You can do this yourself. You can go to any consultant. You don't have to come to us. But I'm saying it's very important to actually do a search to find the people who will bring the most value to you. And some of them may be too busy to have time to respond to your, your email inquiries, or to come to your website or your booth at a trade show or conference. But they might be the right candidates, and they may be worth chasing. So it's something that we find uniformly true in India, that the best and most successful partners are often so busy servicing their current business that they don't really have time to look up until somebody comes and makes a good pitch to them. The Indian economy continues to grow. The growth slowed down a little bit, but it's still going at a pretty good clip, particularly in the urban areas. And so I think it's important to conduct a detailed search. Let's move on. So now I'm going to talk about products. So far we were talking about distribution. I'm now going to talk about the next P of marketing, or product. And so one of our clients hired us because their sales in India weren't doing so well. They'd been in India for a while, they had distribution, and we looked at their product portfolio. We looked at all of the work that they had done. Our conclusion was that the price point that they had set for their products was fine. The level of marketing and promotion that they were using for their limited plan in India seemed quite suitable. And the fact that they didn't distribute the product in the entire country had already been factored in their sales forecast. So why were they doing so poorly? As we looked more closely at their product line, we realized that the way that the product was configured was not appropriate for Indian customers. And we recommended, based on our initial intuition and then backed up by a series of primary studies in a number of Indian cities, that they needed to reconfigure their product in a very minor way, essentially remove one of their ingredients. So it wasn't even a cost increase. It was just a matter of creating a special SKU that had one less ingredient than they were used to offering. And as a result of that, they were able to reduce the cost of the product without increasing any prices, without reducing any price by about 6%. And they found that as they introduced this this new twist to the product that their sales went up substantially. We worked for this particular client for a couple of years, and then they found that they had understood what they were doing, and they could continue on their own. So the takeaway really is that you need to make your products India ready. And let me give you a business example. Medtronic, the world's largest independent medical device company, offers its pacemakers and stents and defibrillators and a whole range of products in India. It's the new CEO, Omar Ishrak, actually grew up in Bangladesh and has made a strong focus to growing their business in India. India works mostly on a cash basis for medical treatment. Insurance until recently wasn't a major factor. So Medtronic took the step of introducing the idea of selling its medical devices on installment payment plans to the patients or the consumers. So the doctors will do the surgery and install the device, but the patient in some cases can pay across over a period of 2 or 3 years. And that makes it much more acceptable. It's not something that's routine in other countries, but it has worked well for this company in India. Let me move on. Let's talk about the next P, promotion or advertising. And you remember Amitabh Bachchan, the biggest movie star in India. So here's a relationship he has, being the so-called brand ambassador for a company whose primary product is concrete. So imagine driving on Michigan Avenue in Chicago or Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles and seeing a large billboard that shows Tom Cruise or Leonardo DiCaprio endorsing an industrial product such as cement or concrete. It's really difficult to imagine that kind of thing happening in the West, but it's quite common in India, where some of the major celebrities out of entertainment and out of sports such as cricket are involved in B2B kind of product advertising. Promotion and advertising in India are very well developed. Ad agencies, PR agencies, and other entities in India are really operating at world-class standards. And so I think you will find plenty of opportunity if your product can benefit from that kind of promotion. The interesting thing about India, in addition to the existence of world-class agencies, is the fact that all media is growing in India. Literacy is growing. The availability of radio, commercial radio, FM radio is relatively new. There's numerous new television channels that have come up in the last decade. The print magazines used to really be limited to news and entertainment, but now the specialized trade magazines, the special interest magazines have multiplied quite a bit, including B2B magazines. And then, of course, the internet media also continues to grow, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Google's search engine and advertising capabilities. So you will find that there is plenty of opportunity to get your message out there. It does work a little differently in India because some of the standards are different. When I came to this country many years ago, in the first few weeks I learned that in business you don't talk about religion or politics, and that's really not the case in India at all. You will see advertising that does address those issues very, very directly, and it's not considered confrontational or controversial, I should say, at all. So you will have all kinds of advertising happening in India, and it's best to work with a local partner to be able to adapt your core message. We don't ask you to go away from your core values, but you do want to adapt to the Indian environment. Okay. So Priya, can we run one more poll?
Yeah, sure. We also have a question, Gunjan, if you want to address that.
Sure. Let's do the question first.
Okay. And while you're addressing it, I'll run the poll. So Jared is asking, what kind of infrastructure investment is expected to benefit from the partial tax pass-through regime for infrastructure investment trusts? Will the new investment be more concentrated on the transport side, the water, the sewage side, the telecom, or something else?
Okay, so I think I need to give some background to this question. India recently in its budget last month announced that it would permit real estate investment trusts, or REITs as they are known. And REITs have been very common in the United States as a method of raising investment for real estate. But at the same time that India opened the market to REITs, they also announced a new kind of investment called the infrastructure investment trust. And I think that's what the questioner is referring to. Now, this is just a few weeks old. And so I would venture to say that we should wait and see how this will materialize and become real, where it will apply and where foreign companies can best play. The different sectors of infrastructure that the questioner listed, I think all of them will have opportunity for growth. But my filter and Amrit's filter always is looking at, does it make sense for a foreign company to play in that specific sector? So historically, we have steered our clients away from investments, for example, in roads, because that sector was often run by the state level and often was full of corruption. Now that has started to change, so I'm not saying that that will be the case going forward. But many of the other sectors are open. Historically, American companies have been a little shy to get into this, other than in the form of a simple, straight private equity type investment. But we expect that this is going to change in the new government. So I would say, please hold your question for another couple of months. Let's see how this plays out, and then we can give you a much more realistic answer as to how this will play out.
Thanks, Gunjan. Folks, still waiting for a few people to poll, so if you can submit your answers, and then we can go ahead and move on.
Is the poll active, Supriya?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't see it on my screen.
Oh, no, people are voting.
Okay. I'm the last to know.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll out and share the results.
All right, interesting. So we have about a third of the people who have some sales in India and they want to increase them. You've got a small percentage of people who are pretty far advanced in the sense that they have a subsidiary or a factory or a JV, and roughly an equal number, 15%, who is at the early stage of considering the idea. And then 10% who say that India sales are already an important part of the company's success. So this is an interesting evolution, and one that I have been predicting for a while that will happen to the people who come to our webinars and the people who are interested in India in general. This group of people who have some success in India but are now ready to go to the next step. Many of these companies had hesitated over the last few years when the previous UPA government was in power because things were not moving quickly, and people were discouraged by the Indian bureaucracy and the mixed messages that it was sending. We have seen since the end of May, when the new government came to power, that many of these companies that were on the sidelines have rushed forward, and our activity in terms of helping them, helping prior clients who had slowed down and helping new clients has gone up dramatically. And I think this is what we are seeing in today's webinar as well. I do want to address questions from anybody in this spectrum. So let's go ahead. And you said there was another question, Sophia, was there?
Yeah, we have a question from Chris, who's asking, isn't India very similar to China as a market?
Aha. So this is a good question and one we get all the time. And from the American perspective, looking across the Pacific, at first, China and India seem very similar. They are both billion plus. They are both very poor countries until not so long ago. They both seem to have a lot of talent, tech talent, and you see more and more engagement with both those countries. So very often American companies have set up operations in China of some kind, And after some struggle, they've succeeded, and they say, aha, now we are ready for India, and we'll use our China learning and apply it to India. I'd say 9.5 times out of 10, that can be less than constructive. I talked about that in my book on doing business in India when it came out right after the publisher's China book, that your success in India is almost directly proportionate to how you understand the differences between India and China. And the differences are many. First of all, India is a free market economy. India's stock market has existed since the 1800s. India does not censor foreign media in terms of political discussions, in terms of movies coming in terms of awareness of the rest of the world. So Indian business executives are very much aware of the reality on the ground in the US and the rest of the world. India is also a very heterogeneous country. China is heterogeneous as well, but India is far more heterogeneous in the sense of the 23 official languages, in terms of every major religion being practiced in India. There's 25 million Christians in India. India's last defense minister was a Christian. India has a small Jewish population in the south. It has Sikhs and Hindus and Muslims, the third largest population of Muslims in the world. So it's much more complex. India has a free press, unlike China. And India was a founding member of the World Trade Organization. And in general, our clients tell us that they believe that there is far more request for intellectual property and security in India than there is in China. We don't necessarily always agree with that. There are concerns in some areas around IP in India, particularly in entertainment. In most sectors, however, at least we are clear that the Indian government are not complicit in IP theft. So these are just some of the high points. So I would caution you, as you look at India, to look at it as you might look at Europe. Okay? Not as you might look at Italy or Sweden, but as really a region that is as complex and as textured as Europe. So your selling strategy in Sweden compared to Italy or Greece compared to France may be very different, and in some business efforts you may need to have this kind of approach. So I could go on and on about this question, but let me stop there. Is there any other question at this point?
No, Gunjan, but I would encourage folks, as you can see, this is a great opportunity for you to get your questions answered by Gunjan. So keep sending us your questions and we will answer them. Thanks.
Yeah. For some of the emails you might have received, we described this as an interactive web clinic, and we really mean that. That's always been our approach. We don't give the same webinar twice ever because it's just really we are responding to the needs and the questions of the audience. So every rendering of our webinar is timely and unique and different. At least we try to make it that way. So let me talk about an example that Secretary John Kerry and Penny Pritzker happened to refer to. We've been talking about Ford for a while, but they brought this up last week in India as well. So the Ford Motor Company went to India, I think in the 60s, and they were making tractors at that time. Not doing very well. They did okay, but not terrifically well. In the 90s and 2000s, they really expanded their footprint in India, focusing on automobiles. And then they realized that to make India a real success, that they needed to design cars specifically for the Indian market. One of their first such successes is the Figo, and it is a subcompact kind of car, like a Toyota Yaris or Chevy Geo, is a very small car. It's sold at $6,000 odd, and its global launch was at the automobile show in Delhi, not Detroit. The car is made in the southern city of Chennai, and they have started exporting it vigorously. Ford has another factory in the state of Gujarat, as I mentioned earlier, and recently Ford has committed that over the next 5 years they'll invest up to $1 billion to make India a manufacturing hub to produce the Figo and the EcoSport and many other cars in India, not only for the Indian market, but for export to the rest of Asia and to Africa and perhaps even Europe. GM has had some success in India as well. We don't see Chrysler present in any significant way in India. Many of the European and Japanese and other brands are there as well. So let's move on to the next slide. So we've talked about, we've done the overview and I've described the 4 P's of marketing. Let's talk a little bit about markers of success. Some of the questions have already referred to this, but let me just get into this in a more organized manner. So one of the things that the government of India and Western media and sometimes India consultants will tell you, hey, you'll have no problem doing business in India because the Indians, after all, speak English. And for most Americans, if they have a physician who happens to be from India, if they have a colleague, they found generally that the person's English is quite fluent. And so they make the assumption that when they travel to New Delhi or Mumbai or Ahmedabad or Pune in India, that they will do just fine. And it's a tempting assumption because on the surface you appear to do fine because you can, for the most part, understand the words that people say. But here lies a major pitfall. They may speak English in India, but they don't think American. Okay? You may understand the words that people say, you may understand their sentences, but the way I like to put it is you may not understand the paragraphs or you may not understand the intent behind what they are saying. And this is a subject when I teach a workshop on doing business in India, I spend 20% of my time in that workshop really talking about cross-cultural communication expertise. And so I know I'm just giving you the real high level of this. Keep in mind that even though you don't need a translator when you go to India to translate Chinese into English or Japanese into English, you do need someone on your side, or you can develop this skill yourself to be able to listen very carefully, go beyond the words, understand the intent. It takes a while. And that's one of why I asked this question, have you spent 30 days or more in business in India? Because the first couple of trips, if you come back from India and you're not thoroughly confused, you just haven't listened hard enough. It's a real important thing to understand. Some of our clients and some other people I met in the course of writing my book who are not our clients have become masters at this. They can communicate with Indians as well as other Indians can. It is not a secret club. And India is an open society, and unlike many other Asian countries, it doesn't matter where you come from. If you can listen and you're talking to a Punjabi in northern India, whether you happen to be from Texas, which is halfway across the world, or Tamil Nadu, which is in the same country, you appear just as foreign to the Punjabi. And so if you reach out and you approach them with humility and an open ear, you will find that you can overcome this barrier. But I'd say in most of our consulting engagements, when people have had limited success in India, a big part of that has to do with the ability to communicate effectively and going beyond language, really. Okay. The other challenge that I think people face is that when they decide to look at India, they'll look at their staff and they say, Joe is from India and he must know the country. He's worked with us 20 years and we'll take him along and all our problems will be solved. But there's a couple of problems with that approach. India has changed fairly significantly. The changes started really in 1991 when the country liberalized, and the changes continued. I mean, they call me an India expert, and I can tell you there is not a single trip that I have made to India where I didn't come back and say, oh darn, I used to think I knew this, but I've been wrong all along. I was in India in May and June, and again, the same thing happened. I go there several times a year. India is changing and changing fast, and people who are not focused on the US-India business effort are often out of touch with that. In fact, many times the people who approach us for help and guidance at the potential clients are the Indian Americans who have been working at their companies for 2, 3, 5 or more years, and they find that their colleagues are asking them for a lot of advice where they realize that, hey, maybe I don't have all the answers, and they turn to someone like us or another consulting company. The third point, and this is a point I wouldn't have made 5 years ago or 4 years ago, but it's really one that I think is important now, is that the time to enter India is now. You don't really need to wait. All the things that are happening, they are in place. If you wait for all of the policies to be fully fructified, you may be too late because your competitors may be in there and doing well. So I would say that you should look at entering India or expanding your presence in India sometime this year if you want to do it. India may not be the right place for you, and that's fine. That's again something you have to look at and decide whether you want to go there at all. So contained here is the answer to the question about China that came up earlier. But the other 2 points relate to preparation. If you're going to spend a week in India, 90% of the work is really done before you get on that plane. We don't want to be learning things for the first time when you go to India. The time there is really spent on building relationships, data gathering, and all of that, analysis, all of that really should be done by you or your consulting partner, your advisors, well ahead of time. And the final point that I think is important, and I'm not the only one to say this, is really that India is always a marathon. Very seldom is it a sprint. If you are persistent, you will be rewarded in India. If you are not, then you may get frustrated. And I talk about this in some of my articles. One of the people I worked with in India on the very first trip came back and said, I think India stands for I'll never do it again. If you go with that attitude, you typically won't succeed in India. You need to invest considerable effort before you start making substantial profits. But once you do that, the number of successes of foreign companies in India are numerous. Many companies that have not succeeded in China have done very well in India. I mentioned Cummins earlier. Qualcomm is another great example from here in Southern California. They do extremely well in India. Our client Paramount Farms, the list goes on and on. There are many companies that have done very well in India, provided they put in the effort. So this brings us to the end of the presentation today. And Supriya mentioned my Huffington Post article. I can send that out. We can send that out to anyone who wants. I also wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review blog about overcoming pitfalls in India. And some of those points I've covered today, but I'm happy to send that out as well. Supriya, are there other questions I can take on?
Yes. Yeah, we actually have quite a few questions, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have a question from Elena, who's asking, do Indian consumers perceive India-based brands more favorable than the US and China brands?
Great question, Elena. And I would say, if you asked me this question 10 years ago, the answer would have been that Indian brands were not really looked upon very favorably by Indian consumers. India was ruled by the British for 200 years. And during that time, the British rulers drilled upon the Indian population that everything British was better than anything Indian. It took a while for that to go away. And at that, when they left India, the local manufacturing capabilities were very limited. So it was true that most Indian products were shoddy. And so people would, at any way possible, try to get products from overseas for anything, whether it's industrial or a business or a consumer need. That now is no longer the case. Foreign brands are still very popular. Foreign brands are still very well accepted. But there are many Indian brands that have come up and done very well domestically, whether it is a business-to-business kind of relationship. My former employer, Larsen & Toubro, has grown to become one of the most respected companies in India and across Africa, the rest of Asia, where they're doing construction and other projects. You look at a company called Godrej, run by the Godrej family. They're doing remarkably well, not only in India, but also in Latin America. So Indian brands are slowly making their way to success, not just in India, but across the rest of the world. If you look at the brand studies where they rank the top 100 brands, I think you'll only find 2 or 3 Indian brands listed there today. My prediction is that there'll be at least a dozen within the next 5 years. Now, I'm trying to see whether your question has to do with, when you're looking at markets in India, whether you should partner with Indian brands or only with foreign brands. And the short answer to that, without knowing specifically what you want to do, is that you will probably benefit by partnering with a combination of Indian and Western brands or foreign brands. you should not limit yourself only to the foreign brands as used to be the case, say 10 years ago. Supriya?
Great. Thank you, Gunjan. We have a question from Paul. How does one communicate effectively in India and build up a sales team that is proactive rather than reactive? They have a small sales team in Bangalore, but they find that the team gets distracted and misaligned with the headquarter objective.
Yeah, so that's, there's a lot of things wrapped up into that question. To make the team proactive rather than reactive is an important thing, an important goal, but to make that happen, we would need to know a lot more about the company. So let me just speak in general terms. My guess is there are two reasons why the sales team is being reactive. Number one is the historical Indian attitude about cultural trait, about being being deferential to the boss, wherever the boss happens to be, whether they're in the US or in India. And smart bosses know how to overcome that and encourage their employees and their teams to challenge them. That's not a cultural trait that is encouraged in Asian cultures, whether it's Japan, China, or India. You're always socialized growing up to respect your elders and keep your mouth shut. I'll give you a cultural example here. When an American mother is scolding her child, I've often heard her say, "Look into my eyes look at me when I talk to you." Okay. In India, it's almost the other way around. If a child is being scolded by their parent, they're supposed to lower their eyes as a symbol of respect and deference. If they stare back at their parent, they're probably going to make the parent very upset. Now, this is a parenting example, but it's really something that is kind of built into Indian and many Asian cultures. And so you have to have a way to reward and overcome that. Okay. So that's one aspect. The other aspect, and I have no idea whether this is true for the questioner or not, but when you're looking at a distant sales team, it is possible that your DNA is not in their DNA, that what you expect them to believe about the product is not what they truly believe, or they hear you and they say this is completely impossible in India, and they've said that once or twice and they haven't been listened to. So they live in this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde world where they accept what you say and they know that they have to subscribe to these beliefs when they respond to you, but when they go and meet their prospects, they know that if they carry that message, they'll be laughed out or they won't be listened to, and so they say something that they find socially acceptable but is not acceptable to you and is probably not producing sales. Now, I'm making a leap. I'm not saying that this is something that is happening to you or your company, but these are the kinds of things that we often find when we start to analyze the limited success of a sales team located in India. So again, this is something we can explore more offline if you want to send me some details about your particular scenario. Now, I know we are over time, so people who want to drop off can, but I will stay on for another 5 minutes or so, Supriya.
Great. We have a couple more questions that we can get through quickly. Jared is asking, do you expect the new government to emphasize development of strategic resources like fertilizer inputs, shale oil, gas, etc.?
The short answer is yes. This government is all about development, and all of those things all of the items you described, oil, fertilizer, are crucial for development. The motto of this company, this government, I'm sorry, is faster development and inclusive development. So it's certainly going to happen, and we are seeing that becoming reality today. Now, it's yet to be seen what they will prioritize. They have a slate of 100 things they need to do, and they can probably do only 10 of them. Which 10 they're going to be successful with is something that time will tell. We have some ideas, and some of them I've referred to in my articles and my quotes in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere. But really, the next few months will tell where the emphasis will be.
Great. Thank you, Gunjan. We're going to address one last question from Alistair, who is asking, an earlier slide suggests that professional services are set to grow in India. However, that can mean that we must be competitive on primarily a labor basis. on what other basis do you expect this sector to grow?
Yes, so anybody in professional services, whether they are architects, engineers, designers, is faced with this challenge. You know, they're used to dollar billing rates, and they go to India, and a country where per capita income is much lower, and they say, how can we possibly succeed? Well, dozens, hundreds of companies are succeeding in offering services of all kinds in India. You have to look at your service portfolio and extract from it where you offer the most value. And that may not always be what, where you offer the most value to your US or your European clients. You have to look at the Indian market and see what in your product offering resonates with the needs of the Indian market. And that subset will be valued at global prices by the Indian buyer, provided you can demonstrate to them that they can make money from that investment at that value. And many, many, many times that is the case because of the multiplier effect of your professional services. We've had cases like this where American companies are offering IT services all the way to India and being able to exercise that leverage. We've had cases where architects and engineers and others have been able to offer those services. But the important thing is to distill your portfolio of skills to that subset that will resonate with India. And that work can be done in the US at US prices, or your US staff can bill at American prices in a country like India. Now, typically to succeed, you then have to add to that a complete portfolio which you can draw upon by using local labor and talent, or by partnering with someone who can provide that. And again, in the services business, it's important to partner with someone where 1 + 1 doesn't become 1.1 rather than 2. So you've got to find a partner that adds incremental value and doesn't take away from the overall picture. So that partner selection can be crucial. For some people, it makes sense to hire your own people in India. Many of our clients, and I gave some examples earlier, but many of our clients have chosen to do that. It's a little bit of a longer ramp rate, but it's absolutely possible. In my book, I talk about the world's largest refinery system being built in Jamnagar, Gujarat, where Reliance owns 2 refineries that produce together a million barrels a day. And while those refineries were being built, Bechtel, one of the largest construction companies in the world, had 3,500 engineers working on that project. And so it's absolutely possible. You drive around Mumbai or Bangalore or any major city in India, you will see many residential and commercial developments where American architects have been involved, offering a piece of the overall solution. And so absolutely, it's possible regardless of the kind of service business that you have. There's a place that you as a professional service company can play a role.
Great. Thank you so much, Gunjan, for all the information you shared today. And thank you, everyone, for attending the webinar today and for being a very interactive audience. We hope the webinar was informative. If you have any additional questions, please do email us at usa@amritt.com. Please make sure as you're exiting the webinar that you answer a brief survey we would like you to fill, and we would really appreciate your feedback. If you have any friends or colleagues who you think might benefit from a similar webinar, please do have them register on our website, www.amritt.com, and we will notify them of any upcoming webinars. Thank you very much for attending today, and have a nice day. Goodbye.